So friends, welcome to the introduction of the news as public good, and welcome to this program. This lecture is part of your paper on news and society. The primary focus of this module is to understand the notion of public good and the need to understand information and news as public good. This module also presents various scholarly debates concerning news as public good and the challenges in the contemporary times. Along with recent challenges, this module also explores the need and the mechanism to treat news as a public good. The basics of information and public good debates. Let's start with this. The 21st century can be understood as the era of information. With the growth of information technologies and the convergence of the space and time, information can be seen as one of the primary sources for various modes of transaction. Information is seen today as a key to such transaction. As informed by Castle's 1996 Vision Authority, we are slowly transcending in a phase where information is becoming the value of exchange and means of achieving a higher supremacy within the society. Information, if being smartly gathered and wisely utilized, is paving the way for a brighter and better functioning of various machineries of the governments. Every individual, group, and organizations, and they are connected to each other through means of communication, which is also an important fuel for the processing of various forms of communication between them. It can be said that the agency in control over the maximum levels of information holds the ability of guiding the process of development of any society. However, in the light of this argument, information can also be seen and understood as a pivotal necessity for the process of growth and development in order for progress in the society. Taking the notion of public good into consideration, it is argued by the media scholars that information should be devoid of any form of hegemonic control. Rather, it must act as a public good which can be accessed equally by everyone. Therefore, any type of information which is targeted towards the public's welfare, both directly and indirectly, should be accessible to the people in order to ensure a sound and holistic development within the society. However, the central question that emerges is whether the public has access to the kind of information which they can consider as crucial for development and accessible to them too. This module attempts to critically look into the argument of news and information being a public good and to what degree it is able to fulfill its expected and desired conditions. India, as you know, is a rich cultural and ethnic country where the degree of culture and tradition varies across different regions. Such diversities affect the flow of information as well as a two-way channel of communication. Regional diversity also affects, in a way, the needs and wants of people by the government in power. The notion of caste and class-based conflicts can be better addressed if the process of information dissemination is holistic and plural in nature. For instance, if we are focused towards bringing a qualitative change within the different social and economic strata within the society, we need to ensure that the flow of information has to be plural and easily accessible to all. Different policies and programs can be better implemented when the access to the required information by the public. Technology, in this sense, has played a critical role in broadening the boundaries of interaction between the people and the agencies, where the flow of information has become rapid and of course transparent in nature. Well, in reality, it remains distorted in India. In India, the media as a fifth estate is unable to play an effective role as a supplier of unbiased and raw information which can be readily accepted and processed by the concerned public. The actual scenario, which is reflected in the case of India, is the economic hegemony and the unending desire for profits through information manipulation. It has been commonly agreed that information in a democratic system is very crucial. However, the system has started to get negatively affected by the monopolistic control over news and information, which in turn is strangulating the opportunities of participation of the people or within the society. People are slowly becoming unaware about happenings within the society. As a result, meaningful actions being taken are less in frequency. Now, let's look into the concept of public good. Cleveland in 1986 says, and I quote, that information is the symbolic representation in any medium of material created by human intelligence and understood by human brain, unquote. Sparks in 1995 has further added that, within quote, information is increasingly the most important form of power, unquote. Information may not necessarily be depletive. It may expand in terms of how it is used. Information cannot be owned, but its delivery of service can be. Here, buying or selling of information is not an exchange transaction, rather it is a change transaction. If information is such which cannot be owned, then much of the monopolies cannot be treated as if being the agencies for exchange, like we see it in terms of goods and services exchange within a traditional marketplace. The central concern, which fails to be highlighted here, is the fact as to what kind of information that can be classified as being important and should be kept for how long, and who are its benefactors in the long run. It is argued that the first important stage regarding information is that the state and the agencies have to be responsible and accountable to their people. Therefore, the nature of information being processed by it should come under the purview of public interest. For instance, there are many third-party agencies within the developed nations, such as WikiLeaks, which emphasize on the aspect of public interest by providing a space for the sharing of the government information irrespective of its nature. It believes in the principle that it's the right of the people to know. This aspect can be seen as very crucial, as it proves to be beneficial for effective decision-making process by the public. Bloomer and Maz in 1967 have suggested three key aspects of the importance of information which is controlled by media and how it affects us. Firstly, during the time of elections, media plays an important role in providing a picture of the existing political system. Second, in the process of establishing and serving group relationships and interests. And third, as a source of information and knowledge for the masses. All these three considerations and the role of media and its sharing of information are highly crucial for the overall welfare to the society. Becker in 2002 has defined public good is an item for which one person's use or a benefit from the product doesn't affect the use or benefit of another person. Jun has suggested that public goods must be distinguished from private goods because public goods involves shared interests and values of citizens in a civil society, whereas a private good refers to the values of private individuals. Since public goods are social outputs that people in a community wish to obtain for common goals, they have a very important role to play within the society. A different perspective of public good has been proposed by J. Mandel and John Mandel in 2001. It states, I quote, "In economic theory, public goods are those products and services that are valuable to the society but are undersupplied when society relies on private markets to provide them. Because they are needed and will not be made sufficiently available through private market, public goods must be provided by the government." Unquote. Relating the concept of information with the notion of public good, scholars point out that the ability of providing information as a public good lies effectively within the hands of the state, as there is no profit agenda as seen by the private agencies. Private companies distribute information, but due to the strong competition within the market, there are chances of incorrect information or half-baked information to be circulated. Since these agencies have their own profit agenda, the aspects of public welfare control fit within their objectives. Further, Merrill 1999 has stated that when a good is determined for the entire community on the basis of who is willing to pay, it is likely that it will not satisfy the preference of the wider population. Public goods have to be understood as those consumption items whose demand cannot be decided by the individual consumer, but by the society as a whole. A public good or service may be consumed without reducing the amount available for others and cannot be withheld from those who lack the capacity to pay. As a result, the market dynamics fail to provide the necessary, as they are greatly dependent upon the economic incentives. The other concern about public good is the issue of undersupply and free riding. These issues hinder the overall impact of information within the supply, as the issue of undersupply of information creates a situation of scarcity where the control over the information is largely concentrated and governed by the principles of economic exchange. The other is the issue of free riding, where a good number of individuals enjoy the benefits of struggle of a few individuals. It means that free riding creates a situation of distrust and inactiveness, as the efforts put in by a certain group of individuals is sidelined and the benefits are enjoyed by others whose contribution towards the effort is either minimum or almost absent. These factors create different degrees of complications for the information being provided as public good, and which in the later courses can be effectively utilized for development purposes. Now let's talk about news and private sector dynamics. The general market trend in almost every part of the globe is that with the undersupply of products and growing consumer demands, the capitalists have an advantage of making supernormal profits, as the producers and sellers have the powers to negotiate the prices of the product and services. However, when it comes to information or news per se, it can be a very unethical and harmful tactic of confining the access to information within a few hands. The private entrepreneurs, in that sense, cannot be considered an apt agencies for the dissemination of information to the public. For news and information to be considered as a public good, it has to bypass the private sector markets. Although the government can be considered as an effective agency for sharing the information for public welfare, it cannot be entirely held responsible for the dissemination of information to different stakeholders within the society. Therefore, need of the hour is an autonomous body which can determine the exact informational needs of diverse sections within the society and community. Media has become the major source of information in the society in any case. The knowledge about political and social affairs is governed by various media channels, which are controlled by both the state as well as private sectors. Feintuch and Varney in 1999 discuss that media in the modern age as a concept is viewed as a huge and increasingly global commercial market. However, if the commercial importance is the driving force of media towards monopoly or near monopoly, then this would result in a more restricted channels for the flow of information. The knowledge base that is created becomes less a common good and more of a privileged possession of individual owners. The growing rate of proprietorship can be seen as a very dangerous sign towards the notion of information and news being considered as a public good. This is because of the fact that the freedom of individual to access and express the information across different spheres becomes a challenging and cumbersome task, primarily due to the inability of accessing the required degree of information. It can be observed that the central purpose of commercial media is not to deliver products to the audiences, but to deliver the audience as a product to the advertisers, where the notion of information and news being considered as public good gets lost. Now let's talk about news as public good and information crisis. Apart from the issues of control over news and information and the complexities attached to news becoming a public good, there is another important challenge that emerges when such debates and discussions are highlighted within the society. This is the issue of the nature of information, which can be determined as to whether it is suitable to be provided as a public good or not. In 2006, David has raised a very valid point regarding the nature of information or news which can be considered as a public good. Well, media, as we have been told, can tell us a great deal about social realities, but the text doesn't merely mirror the actual realities. At times, it creates an alternative set of realities. Such versions of reality depends upon the social position and the interest and experiences of those who produce them. The information which is being passed as a public good also becomes affected by the degree of sensitivity attached within it. In the contemporary scenario, different news channels, largely privatized news channels, focus on the aspect of sensationalism. They sensationalize the elements of news which largely revolve around war, harassment, communal classes, physical abuse, sexual harassment, and many more are given a lot more emphasis rather than other important and alternative matters. The reality which is being formulated by the public about the society in question gets highly distorted and disconnected in the process. This leads to irrational choices and constant fear for security. What we can observe here is that the powerful groups responsible for providing information shape the news in multidimensional ways, such as by providing selected information, offering access to stories in exchange for favorable coverage, spreading disinformation, and threatening reprisals. In 2006, David points out that information is undergoing layers of alterations in order for it to be consumed within the market. Mass media's most captivating and very often vulgarizing impact is felt in the forms propaganda for sociopolitical control. The huge power of media can overwhelm people with points of view which may well turn out to be the negative of progress, freedom, and human dignity, and often can result in the loss of trust, which is a crucial ingredient in human communication. In case of India, the ownership patterns over different media houses in itself is contradictory to the notion of public good. The cross-ownership patterns and concentration in ownership provides very little scope and freedom to express information and news in the form of public good. The case of political parties and media relations is an apt example of how media is creating alternative realities and distorting the rationality of the public. The coverage of information and its packaging and dissemination in a biased manner affects the abilities of the general public in accepting the facts presented to them and initiates a process of highly mediatized impact, where the general public becomes entirely dependent upon these agencies for information. Well, the importance of information itself and having it cannot be undermined. Information can play a critical role as an instrument of power. It can serve the ends of either liberation or of operation of either the growth of individual personality or drilling human beings into uniformity. The imaginative use of sound and image in the audiovisual media can be, on the one hand, be accelerating experience in elevating the others. However, at the same time, it can be devastatingly effective in enslaving people. On the other hand, the scope of allowing individuals and groups to have access to a wide range of information, both political as well as cultural, is great concern in terms of limiting the ability of looking at the reality from various alternative viewpoints due to the hegemonic and propaganda-prone characteristics of news and information broadcasted by such agencies. G. Craig in 2007 has discussed that the mediated nature of public life causes concentration because it gives the media extraordinary control of information distribution and interpretation, and affords to the public limited opportunity to direct feedback. The size of media outlets and the costs involved in producing material for public dissemination means that there is a generation of polarity in a society between information providers and information receivers. Under these circumstances, it is argued that the public feels disconnected from public life. They become more spectators of the process in which they have from limited to no contribution. Thus, what can be interpreted is the fact that the press may have external responsibility, but there is nothing in theory which has made it clear in principle to whom that responsibility would be. Within the limits of the democratic tradition, the responsibility of the news houses and the journalists is that valid and factual information should be discharged in the first instance to the citizens without any form of barriers or restrictions. This approach would lead to the consideration of mass media as primarily a part of the holistic socio-political process. It follows from this construct, as Sparks in 1995 argues, that media as part of the political apparatus also pursues political agendas. For example, health, education campaigns, values, virtues of contraception or safe sex, or giving up tobaccos, which are of huge public importance. But its degree of frequency and depth is limited, which is over a course of time requires critical reevaluation. So friends, we have come to the conclusion of the program. While summing up, we can reiterate some of the very key points as presented in detail in this program. First, the idea of public good and the importance of information and news being considered as vitally important for the public within the society. Second, the issues of ownership and the complexities project on the delivery of news and information as a public good. The issue of nature of information that distorts the interpretation of the public towards relevant socio-political matters. Fourth and lastly, there's need to revisit the concept of information as a public good for future enhancement of participation of the public towards the growth and development of the society. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. For more details, please read the e-text of this lecture properly and attempt the questions given at the end of the module. Thank you very much indeed.